Continuing, do you currently have any concerns that generative AI might like undermine the critical thinking skills of like other people in your industry?
Yes. And this is just my own bias because I think it's important. I think writing can be and reading can be really helpful in helping to for people to think. And I worry about this culture of TLDR, which drives me
Oh,
crazy whenever anybody says it at work. What's the TLDR? And it's just like, I just cry inside every time someone says this. I'm like, well, since you don't have time to read just a couple of pages in a memo or a research report or, like, why can't we also normalize making time to actually do the depth work, reading and thinking and writing, because that's very clarifying. And so I do worry that I talk to some leaders who say, I don't even write emails anymore.
oh,
And and they say, if I just do some prompts, this Copilot will churn out an email and people like it because I can tell the email, and be empathetic, make it an empathetic tone. And I think, well, this is, perhaps not all of those thoughts are yours, and that sentiment, maybe you wanted it to be empathetic, but is that really an actual reflection of how you think? Or are you just doing that to be manipulative? So I feel like when people read and write on their own, they really own it. And so that part kind of bothers me. Although I do know that there's times when it's very valuable and useful. But I think if we shift wholesale to really outsourcing our thinking, um, I think that that can be problematic and detrimental.
hmm, yeah. I think that's really interesting from a philosophy standpoint because this is like the industrial revolution all over again because there's people who are really like pushing for the technology, and
Mhm.
then and at that point there were the romantics who just like they focused a lot more on their feelings in contrast to the machines, and now the same thing is happening, which I think is really interesting to look into because I've interviewed both sides of the spectrum. I have interviewed you and then the people who are more there who are in software developing who find it like really useful and really love the productivity aspect of it. Yeah.
I think that all of those sides are true. What I think, and this is probably wearing my philosopher hat, I think that there's value in the debate and discussion. And the thing that happened, with the idealist and the romanticism era and all of that was, and there was revolution and all of this, is there was discourse. People wrestled these ideas to the ground and they, came up with, basically the philosophical underpinnings that supports everything right now. And I actually think we need to wrestle back to the ground and really, really take to task, what we really think about reality. Now we have quantum computing. Like there's all of these different things that are now new that we can go back and we could really, dismantle some of these philosophical ideas and see which ones now serve us going forward. And also really be very critical of what we're building and not maybe be so critical, but really examine what we're building and how we're building it and how it will be used and what safeguards need to be there, and just that really spending time and really wrestling those things to the ground like they did way back then. Because really discourse and really like all of those letters that these philosophers and these revolutionaries were writing. I mean, we have the Constitution, right? We have the Declaration of Independence. Like that's a beautiful document. People really wrestled these ideas through, and I feel like that's kind of what's missing right now is really that wrestling it through, and it is happening at some level, but it's more kind of um, a discourse that's aimed towards the advancement and the, advancing the capabilities and the capacities and the improving the design and all of that, but we're really not wrestling to the ground. How is this going to affect people? How does this affect our own consciousness? How does it affect societies? How does it affect social technical systems? Those are the things that I feel like we really need to dig into and lean into. Anyway.
Me too. But also zooming out to your answer for the question, how do you think the same thing might be applied to or amplified with students?
So ask that question one more time.
So the question was like, do you have concerns that generative AI might undermine the critical thinking skills of others in your industry? But how might that apply the same way to students or even be amplified in that situation? And with students, I'm specifically speaking about like undergraduate slash high school students.
Yeah. And it's exactly the same thing. I feel like by reading and writing and really wrestling with your ideas, you formulate your own thinking. You come up with a point of view. It's one thing to just ask a Copilot or a ChatGPT a question and have it give you a point of view that you could just repeat, but you haven't internalized it. And humans have to internalize these things for it to become their own point of view. And we really need people with points of view, like students that really have a point of view, even if they research it, all the way to the end and they change their mind, they've still done the work and they've developed the point of view instead of just repeating the point of view. And I think that's really where you get change agents and you get students that emerge out of high school and emerge out of college, really with a point of view and some passion to go and do something really amazing.
I'm doing something right now or trying to. We'll see.
You're
So
doing you're doing this work. So you're actually doing both. You're and this would be interesting because you are using the tools, but you're also doing the work. You're really using it to help you think. And but how does that work for other students that maybe don't have that inclination to use, they just want to use it just to get the answer. And that's where there is a bit of a gap. But how can AI entice you to want to think? Maybe that's the question.
Mhm. So at first, I was a bit of an AI hater, because I thought I'm a writer, right? I'm a liberal arts person. I think AI
Yep.
can't write better than me, and I stand by that because I actually have like a point of view and I can go deep into my feelings about a subject while AI cannot. I have
Yep.
to provide my feelings for it to elaborate on that. But
Mhm.
also, I'm lucky because my mom works in AI. So she finds these tools that she thinks could help me, and she has convinced me to use it. So
Yeah.
I have all these interviews. Each one is an hour, over an hour. And before I would have to transcribe them by myself, but instead she's found a transcription tool for me. And
Mhm.
in this way, I'm very privileged. So I want other students to have that too, which is why I want there to be a course on how to use AI responsibly at my school and maybe at other schools even.
That's a great goal. I think that it will take time and I think that schools will get there, but the fact that you're doing this is just awesome.
Thank you. And so one of the big problems with AI, especially in academia, is how AI generated content should be assessed or credited. And this also works in professional settings. Like if someone uses generative AI to write something for them, how should that be credited? Does it belong to the user or to the databases or to the AI?
Yeah, this is a I think this is a really important question and I think that there's different spectrums. It's like I use other technology, like I use Word
Mhm.
to type things up. I use a printer to print things out. I use a monitor to see the stuff that's in the computer. Like I'm using all this technology, but when I publish a paper, attribute the technology that I use. So I don't say that I used Word. I don't say that I used a laptop. Like I don't attribute the technology that I'm using to create a paper. So there's like that kind of end of the spectrum. So if I'm using Google or if I'm using, Bing, or if I'm using AI and I'm just using it to pull in information, then, perhaps it's just like Word. It doesn't really matter. But if I'm using it to actually co-create it like an author, and this actually is an issue in academia because there's some people who will write a book. In fact, I just read a book recently, and the author was they were clearly using ideas from other researchers, really notable ideas from other researchers, but they didn't cite them. They didn't give credit to those other researchers. So a lot of people kind of shun this book because the author was irresponsible by not recognizing the other work that they were bringing in. And so on that end of the spectrum, I think, if I was doing a co-authored paper, which I've done, and I didn't include my co-author's name, that would be irresponsible of me. And so if I'm not including AI and signaling to the world that I'm using this other generative co-creation partner, um, is that irresponsible? And is there a spectrum here, which is if I use so much of AI, I don't cite it, and then I cite it if I'm doing something specific? I think we just don't know yet, and I think that there's a lot of questions that we need to ask there.
Because I've heard from some people that you should credit the AI because it is like a co-author. But
Mhm.
another point of view is that the AI is a bridge to the sources that it provides you with. So if you ask the AI to cite the sources, you also cite the sources and you don't need to cite the bridge, which is a
Right. Yeah. And that's more like in that word example. Like, I mean, that's just kind of like using, a search engine. Like I really, brought the thing in. But if, for example, I asked for AI to give me a definition of, 10 terms that I'm using in my paper, and I copy and paste that into my paper, I should cite that these definitions were created by this AI. And in the school that I go to, they require that you do that.
mm,
So if it generates something that I verbatim bring in, I have to cite that it came from an AI tool.
that's a good policy so that you don't need to feel guilty about using it, but instead you just have to
Yeah.
cite.
As long as you're citing it and if you're using it verbatim. Now, if I am asking it to, and this is where this is the middle part, right? So if I'm citing it verbatim, I think it should be cited. If I'm just using it for research purposes to find things, I don't think it needs to be cited. But in the middle, if maybe I've um, used it for these definitions and um, or maybe I used it to create an outline and then I wrote the work around the outline, do I cite that part? Like that's that gray part in the middle, and I don't know.
Yeah. That's more of a legal issue, which I'm also interested in about like the intellectual property rights of AI. So I'm gonna go to Microsoft on Monday and trap down some lawyers.
Awesome.
Yeah. Socialize for my mother. She's getting a free socializer. I don't know. I'm just an extrovert, so I can help my mom with that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
They're going to be working in CLAB. And yeah, so there's all kinds of issues with regard to AI and intellectual property, which is, I mean, and it's the full spectrum, like the people that have created the original content that gets pulled into the system and into these models, they're not compensated and their intellectual property is just being used without recognition.
Yeah, New
And
York Times is
that is a big issue.
yeah. New, honestly, they should sue ChatGPT because usually you need to pay for that, but I'm excited to see where that.
So this is where it could be really interesting, and we could see in the future radically different economic models where um, content creators actually, people that can write and people that can do research and people that can create content as input could be compensated for that. Like we could see a really radically new and different and very exciting and maybe even more equitable economic models that come out of this, which I'm very optimistic for.
That's interesting. I need to look into the economic side of it. And that's kind of the future of AI, but what specifically do you see as the future of AI in your industry?
Well, I mean, I work at Microsoft, so the future of AI, the whole entire company is going to be run on AI, and it is going to be an AI company. So it's kind of like it is the future of technology, and there's no going back from here. So it will be, I think there's going to be AI tools that humans use as we interact with everything, but also in the back end. Um, Everything that the person that's engaging with it doesn't see, all of the backend systems are going to be evolving with AI as well. So it's the whole infrastructure evolves with AI, and also all of the interaction involves it evolves with AI.
Mm. So since there's no going back, we're trying to see at what age would AI start being beneficial, especially to be included in an academic setting.
Um, I think that that's going to depend on the evolution of AI, and the evolution of security and privacy within AI. I think it's going to depend on the evolution of the user interactions with AI. Um,
But for right now, just currently at this moment with all of the models that exist, what would be a good age to start utilizing it as a
I,
tool?
yeah, I think probably in high school. I mean, high schoolers are writing, could be writing very complex essays, could be doing research. You're doing all of this research. I think, um, the way you're thinking about it, which is how could we best use AI in a high school setting? Those are the questions that people need to be asking, because I think it would be detrimental right now for anyone to graduate high school and go into college and not know how to use these tools. I mean, it's going to be really important, and it's going to be so mainstream just within, it's kind of mainstream now, but it's going to be even more pervasive that if you're not in high school today using these tools, you're going to be behind in college.
And I think a big problem is everyone is using these tools like secretly because you're not really supposed to use them. So you're
Yeah,
not learning how to use them in the most efficient way, which is also like detrimental to your development because people who are professionals, everyone I've interviewed have like they use AI almost daily to help them with tasks. That's something you have access to as an adult.
yeah.
We should develop those skills.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of argument too about gaming. A lot of people are very negative about using gaming in high school or gaming in college, but there's really valuable skills you can gain through gaming. I
Yeah.
mean, when we look, and then when we look at gaming and AI together, and you think about, those types of skills, and then you think in the future, could a surgeon do a surgery on somebody, very far away, remotely? Potentially, yes. And where would they get those skills? Let's see, AI and gaming. So it is really important that some of these skills just kind of become a part of how we operate, just like reading and writing our skills. And you know, before people could distribute books, um, books were not read. Like silent reading wasn't a thing for hundreds and hundreds of years after reading and writing was a thing. Um, all of the um, all of the consumption of books was done audibly because people would read them because there was not a way to distribute books. So, people grow with the technologies, but and this is going very fast, but you have to be able to track with it
Yeah.
anyway.
So because it's moving so fast,
Mhm.
what would you say could be the like driving force that encourages a wider integration of AI tools in a professional setting?
Yeah, this is the big question that everybody's asking at Microsoft, especially in the sales side. Um,
We came up with a big question too. Let's go.
yeah, this is a hard question, and I think what the data tells us is the the primary reason why people want to adopt AI at scale is when they start using it and they actually start seeing results. And I think the latest numbers I saw um, it was like 91%. So they looked at different tasks and so it was a pretty high bar. So say for example, I am a software developer and I'm coding. If I can get to coding with AI that is something like 91% faster, then
Oh,
I would go full throttle into AI. So it's a really high bar that people have right now because people are very skeptical and people are so used to doing it the same way. So that to get somebody to change behavior is hard, and so that bar is hard. So it's high. And so I think in as things move forward and as more and more people are using AI and these things get better, people are going to more broadly adopt AI, even when they go, gosh, this saves me half the time. Okay. Like people just really need to see that it really helps with one thing that they do really well, and then they'll start to see it in other ways. And so your question is a really important one because even for companies like Microsoft or any other company, selling AI, um, really focusing with customers and really focusing even internally with employees by helping people to just focus on just do this one thing and they see results. Oh, like now do this other thing with AI and you see results rather than throwing all of the AI at them at one time and expecting them to somehow embrace it all at one time, which I think is not realistic. Same with students.
thank you so much. That was the last question.
Yay!